All right, guys, welcome to the Ice Up Season podcast. My name is Emmanuel.
Coach Ru, Donnie Ruiz.
We just finished a killer leg workout, and basically, we're just going to talk about everything from sports, life, business, and getting your take on things and your experiences on how you got to this point here. So why don't we just start with how did you start in all of this? Starting in the CFL, and now you're a strength and conditioning coach, coaching a variety of athletes from high school players, professional athletes, business working men and women. Talk to us about your journey.
Well, it's been a journey, that's for sure. A lot of ups and downs, twists and turns. That's made it very interesting and challenging and rewarding, and all of those different types of words and cliches, of course. But it's been a long journey. Although, as I say, long, it seems like it's gone by quickly. And at this stage of things, as I reflect on a lot of things while trying to maintain my focus on what's forward, I'm pretty pleased, to say where things are at. Satisfied, definitely not, but pretty pleased, I think, in terms of, when I think about it, this whole thing started with like a blank piece of paper, literally a blank piece of paper. I was playing in the CFL for a couple years, I think 7 years, and I just sat down one day and was thinking, how am I going to transition out of the game of football before it kicks me out. And I started thinking about what skills I have, what abilities I have, what things I can offer the world. And it seemed like a natural transition to get into strength training, performance training, and that's kind of how I got started with the whole thing.
So now let's peel back a couple layers. Let's start in high school. Obviously, you were heavily involved in sports. We've talked off camera many times. You were in basketball, football, and anything you can get your hands on. Why football, and what was your high school career like leading up to the point where you got drafted for the CFL? Or was it just the CFL, or did you have bigger goals of reaching the NFL? And if so, what was that journey like from high school up until the pros?
Yeah, as I reflect back on my high school career, some of it's a blur. Just I was so driven in high school to achieve. I was so driven to achieve various things in high school, and if I look back at my high school resume, and I've told this story in a few seminars I've delivered, and I'll probably get into that whole story itself, because I think that that kind of deserves a good in-depth look. Yeah. But to kind of brush through there quickly, in high school I played soccer, basketball, as you said, and football, volleyball. Actually, I played volleyball before I got into or back into football, I should say. And between those three sports, I ran track as well. And at the time, although I think probably my best sport, or that I felt that I was probably best at, was soccer, to be honest. But at the time, soccer was not as visually publicized. Like, my father would get me up at 6:30 in the morning to watch the Spanish league or the Italian league and watch those soccer games, because it wasn't like it was now to watch soccer. And so just, looking at the market of sports, and I just felt, it was either soccer that I was probably best at. I'd say my passion was probably basketball, but I didn't really grow enough, and I wasn't skilled enough as a point guard, so that didn't make sense. I did get I did attract some recruiting for basketball, but football just seemed to be where I got the most recognition from universities and NCAA schools. And so I got to my senior year, and I just finally was like, you know what, I need to dial in a little bit. And my basketball coach, Mr. McDonald, actually, yeah, Mr. McDonald. I was very fortunate and blessed. I had some awesome coaches throughout my career. I'm very, very lucky, and it's important that I think I say that, because I really had awesome coaches from the time I started at 8 years old, Mr. Bailey and Mr. Cam, playing in Hamilton for the Hamilton Stampeders. But yeah, in high school, Mr. McDonald one day just kind of yanked me by my ear and was like, listen, like, basically get your shit together and dial into what you want to do, because you have a skill set, you have the ability, you have the work ethic, but you're not working hard enough in school, and you need to stop running around doing foolishness. And we'll leave it at that for now. And pretty much that summer, I really gave my attention to, I call it training. I was definitely not doing the stuff that I do with my high school athletes now. But, I was just freestyling training. The access to information wasn't the same at the time. And I just did whatever I thought was, I just worked hard, whatever that meant. Hop in my school barbed wire fence to get tires from the auto department in my high school, and chucking those tires over. I'd get a piece of my dad's electrical tape, and get some rope and tie it around my waist, and I'll just sprint with, tires. I didn't know why. I wasn't periodizing anything. But I just knew how to work hard. And I spent that whole summer really focusing on my schoolwork every single day, and I hated it. So to all you high school athletes that hate it, I get it, but it doesn't matter. You need to do it. And that was how the thing went. And then my end of my, I guess it would be my junior year, I was in the Steel City Bowl, an all-star game in Hamilton, and I did really well, and that really put me on the recruiting map. And then I got to my high school, my senior year, and first game, blew it out the park, had an awesome game, yada, yada, yada. Second game, everything's going smooth. And then, boom, tore my ACL, and life came crashing down on me at that time. Didn't know what that meant at the time. It wasn't a common thing, or a publicized thing. And my ACL tore on my right knee. And so, anyways, I went into a bad headspace, and I just felt like that was it. How am I going to do what I want to do? Anyways, very thankful for that moment in time now, although at the time it didn't make sense. I couldn't comprehend what happened to me, why it happened to me, why would this happen to me, but there's so much that I feel like I learned and benefited from that exact moment in time, and I think that's really propelled me along the path here, because that's what kind of triggered my researching into how I can rehab myself, fix myself, and I started learning about training, and it just was this just natural connection, and a lot of lessons I learned at that time helped catapult me into this career path.
So you talk about lessons learned, and you said growing up in Hamilton. What was that environment like? Growing up in a city like Hamilton, obviously it's different than Ottawa, different than Toronto. What were your group of friends like, and going down that path of trying to make it to the pros? Obviously your environment has a huge factor in that, so just touch a bit on like what that environment was like, because the reason why I'm asking is because there seems to be there seems to be like a true connection, especially with your high school athletes. Not just I'm your strength coach, do this program, lift this weight. There seems to be a connection there. So obviously that comes from a place of relatability and how you grew up and the environment that you were in, the people that you were around. So talk about that. What was that upbringing like, and why do you feel as though you have that connection, especially with the high school athletes?
Well, I mean, I think there's a lot of things I can draw on from my high school days and elementary days. First of all, I mean, myself and my brother, like we just grew up fighting, all the time, and I think that, just in that itself, it was like, you either adapt to that or you just shy away from that. And, I think that there was a lot that carved us from that type of, I don't know if I should call that upbringing, but just growing up like that and always just being like, like we use that term now, like stay ready. And it was just, that's just how it was. It's just like every day you walk into school and it was just like, you just, you're just ready. You know what I mean? You don't know what's going to happen, how it's going to go down. And, we fought a lot. And at the same time, we also grew up in a very disciplined house. My father was very disciplined in terms of what we could do, not do, and how he trained my brother and myself, and the upbringing and paying attention to details and, looking at the long picture, looking at the long game. And I grew up, like all of my friends and the, the community that I grew up in, like everybody was good athletes, good at sports. And everybody felt like they were going to make it to some level, you know what I mean? And when I say that, it wasn't just like lip service. It was like everybody like really thought that way. And like, our basketball games down at the court, like they'd be like a lot of lessons were learned from there. Because it was like, you had to go and show out and do your thing at the park, you know what I mean? Or else you'd hear about it at school the next day. And I mean, I remember it being like March and we would be out there with shovels, shoveling off the snow on the basketball court, playing with gloves on, because it was like it was just like that thirst to play and compete. And if there was one thing I think I really learned was how to compete, in the neighborhoods that I grew up in. It was just everything was competition, and I believe that was very healthy. And so, knowing how I was in school, how I felt about school, how my friends were in school, seeing some of my friends succeed, some of my friends, fail out. Some of my friends make, decisions that brought them in one direction. Some of my friends making decisions that brought them in another direction. And all of those different aspects, you then start to evaluate yourself based on, your group of friends or your environment or your community or those around you. And then that helps to kind of mold, the decisions you want to make. And I found for myself, it was, a little bit of all of those scenarios mixing into myself and who I was, trying to become. And, whenever I say like to people like, oh, like I'm, grew up in Hamilton and Stony Creek. And, when I know when I made it to the professional level, like guys would be like, oh, you're from Hamilton, like, oh, Steel City, you must be a tough guy, and like, oh, your dad's, either working, DeFasco in the steel plants or, like those kind of things. And that either you can be like shy down about that or you can feel, proud of that. And, I grew up in a house where it was like you work for and earn whatever you have. And whether that's a little or a lot, it doesn't matter. The point is you work and you earn it. And I think with my high school athletes, they're at that stage where a lot of times they are learning how to develop confidence, true confidence, authentic confidence, not just like I'm the man. And because, like true authentic confidence. And I always think back to what I needed, what I was presented, what I had instilled in me. And then I try to implement that with all of my high school athletes and being very, I think, aware and in tune with those athletes, because each of them needs and requires small little variations and different things, but it's all based off of the same platform for me. And that's visualize, mentally invest yourself in it, whatever it is that you want to achieve. You want to go to the NFL, then start to visualize and mentally, physically apply yourself to achieve that. You want to go to the NBA, you want to be a doctor, you want to be a construction worker, you want to be a business owner. There's all types of different things. Start to visualize that. Start to mentally adapt yourself into doing those things and put those pieces together, because whatever your grand vision is and wherever you are, what matters is the gap filling in those pieces, right? Everybody wants to do this, thing that's down the road, but what are you going to do to bridge yourself towards that? And I think what I've tried to do with my high school athletes is give them some of the tools to start to figure out, okay, you want to get an NCAA scholarship? Great. How are you going to do that? And let's start to build that process. Okay, well, what schools do you want to go to? What grades do you need? What courses do you want to take? What do you want to major in? What do you want to minor in? What things you want to accomplish? And like now you start to fill in that gap from this grandiose vision and to where they are today, whether that's, 15 years old, 14 years old, or 17, and start to fill in the pieces, and I think that starts to help cultivate their mind into the direction that they want to go. And I don't think it's by accident that, a lot of the athletes I'm fortunate to work with are successful.
So now I see you have Laurier on the chest. So at what point for you did you start to visualize going to college, university, and then from university going to the CFL and reaching for the NFL? At what point did that click for you? I know you said in elementary school you had coaches putting you in check basically and saying you need to pick either whatever foolishness you're doing or do something that's going to benefit your future. So at what point did that click for you?
I'd say probably around grade 10 is when it maybe didn't click, but definitely the trigger wasn't around grade 10, where, like I said, I had one group of friends that were going down that path that does not lead in a good direction. And I'll just leave that there. And then, another group of friends that were like just doing enough to stay out of trouble, but not really pursuing anything. And then I was like, well, I don't want to be like any of those scenarios. I want to elevate myself and achieve something great, So I started formulating these ideas, and I would, look in magazines, cut out, wording and quotes, and I'd have them on my ceiling and, all over the place to inspire myself, I guess, and just this hunger that it just festered, you know what I mean, in my stomach, really. And it was just always wanting to be better, be the best, or achieve and accumulate. And so probably around grade 10 is when it really started to, the trigger happened. And then that's when I started to notice work ethic impacts the end result. For me anyways. And I was, very fortunate. I think, I was blessed with some athletic talent, obviously, from both of my parents. But I was never, I was never allowed to just rest on that either. You know what I mean? My parents had me, train as if you were the worst athlete or the worst player or the worst student, and apply yourself that way to be that better. Just because, you might be the best on your team or second best or the fastest that's not enough, because there's somebody else out there doing what you're doing plus. And eventually, that's crash course. That's gonna happen. And the longer you play, the higher levels you obtain, you're gonna meet that guy at some point, right? So I just kept chipping away. And as I say all that, it's important for me to verbalize that I didn't achieve anything I set out to do. It's important. And I'm going to say that again, because for those, kids that are listening or people that are listening, I didn't achieve anything I set out to do. So I failed at all of my major goals.
What were some of those goals, if you don't mind sharing?
So, my plan, my goal, and I was very definitive in terms of I wanted to play, and not just play, but have a long career in the NFL. And I had a specific path along the way that I laid out for myself that if I achieve those things along the way, would potentially lead me in that direction that I would be drafted in the NFL. And it didn't happen. However, a lot of the things at the time that I laid out and the massive goals that I laid out for myself, the alternatives that I did achieve were very close. And so, I still achieved a certain level of success. We'll put it under that category for now. But, I still achieved a lot of things along the way. And that's something else that's helped me, I think, be a better coach, So, yeah.
And talk about your experience at Laurier. What was that like? Were you recruited by any other schools in the city? Did you have any Division I offers? And when you made that decision, what was your university career like?
Well, probably like a lot of other athletes, I've kind of have that story that, I was very recruited out of high school. I know me and my friends, after we'd be playing basketball all day, we'd be walking back to my house to go and get some water or, go and eat or something. And it'd be like, oh, I wonder what school's going to, send you a letter today or going to inquire about you today. And, I'd get home and there'd be, a couple, letters or packages in the mailbox, which, it was exciting, right? And, from some of these Division I schools, Division I AA, Division II schools, Division III, and at the time CIAU, which is U Sports today. Yeah. So, the recruiting process was fun, and, there was a lot of that happening, and a lot of schools, calling me and annoying my parents every day with with voicemails and stuff. And then I got severely injured. I had, complete knee reconstruction on my right knee in my senior year. And once, like I remember after that football game, going home, and I remember going home and putting the voicemail on. And, some of the schools, there was about 6 or 7 schools I was talking to consistently at that time and asking, like, how the game went. And then, I'm calling the coaches back after the game to let them know. And, my mom's like, you can't, like, you got to tell them what happened, and tell them I injured my knee, and okay. And then, yeah, right. And at the time, I didn't understand or comprehend, like, it was a torn ACL. Like, it didn't mean anything to me. Until I went through that, and but at the time telling them, and then them just kind of be like, oh, okay, well, like, good luck with that, keep in touch. And then the drop off happened, you know what I mean? And all of a sudden, like, the letters started to slow down, the bigger, the high profile schools started to disappear. And and then at that stage it was, some of the smaller schools that continued to recruit me. And then that became a difficult thing to accept as, a 16 or 17-year-old kid. Like, I didn't understand what was happening, you know what I mean? And, yeah. And the phone slowed down, the voicemail slowed down, the letters slowed down. And eventually, I went on a couple of recruiting trips, and I eventually made my decision. And I ended up going to Division II school in Minnesota. Yeah. And, went there for 2 years, and just didn't pan out. Nobody's fault. Just didn't pan out. Just didn't work out. And so I ended up coming home. Tried to transfer back up to a Division I school, and then blah 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 blah. Anyways, what it all boils down to is nothing happened. Started the recruiting process back with Canadian universities. Laurier, I think, kind of offered me the best situation. And I just decided, you know what, I'll come back home and I'll go and play at Wilfrid Laurier. And I was most comfortable with the situation that they presented to me, the environment that was there, and I felt that would help me continue to excel with my football and academic career. And so I decided to go to Laurier. And as I say that, I was pissed about it. The mentality I had, like I said, I failed at a lot of things in my life. And, to me at the time, it just felt like I shouldn't be playing in Canada at a Canadian university. Now that was at the time, and that was just the mentality I had. And that was, again, years ago. And so I went there with this real chip on my shoulder. And now I think, for me, that I drew a lot of strength off of that. But I went there with a real chip on my shoulder. Like, I'm going to show everybody that I should not be playing here. I should be playing at a much bigger level. Whether I was right or wrong, it doesn't matter. That's just the mentality that I had in my approach, and I was almost like first, at the start, because I was ineligible to play that season because I had played in the NCAA, so I had to sit out a season. So, going to practice every day, knowing you're not playing on Saturday, and, and Laurie at the time was going through a bit of a transition as well, and just things I saw, on the field, like just player to player, and just, the team atmosphere. Like I just kept my mouth shut, but I was just boiling inside, like watching stuff, you know what I mean, and trying to learn and try to understand, the Canadian game, because had been playing the U.S. Style game, and just taking literally mental notes every single game, every single player, every team that we were playing, and thinking like, this is not going to happen when I get on the field. This is not going to happen, and
dive a little bit deeper into that, because I remember you brought up that story of there'd be a point in time like you would know everything about the person that you're guarding. Yeah. Like almost to a psychotic level.
Yeah, I definitely, like I said, I definitely submerged myself in like studying the other team, studying my opponent, studying the other guys I'd be going against. I started off as a running back, and then, Laurier was trying to build a fast, athletic, defensive team. Mm-hmm. So they had approached me and said, like, hey, we'd like you to try out playing at, DB. And I was like, DB? Like, I don't know how to go backwards. I just know how to go forward. Yeah. But at the same time, I was at the stage in my career that I just was like, I just want to play the game that I know how to play. And if that means playing, DB, then so be it. If that's what's best for the team, then that was still a priority to me. And so I said, okay, and, learned, and, and that was a big challenge for sure. I had some rough spots initially. But I think I adapted relatively quick. And I think another benefit to that situation, I know a lot of kids go through that scenario where, like, I'm this, and now the coach wants to switch me to this. But for me, if anything, that made me become that much better of a student of the game, because I was going to a position I didn't know. Mm-hmm. So I studied, like, the receivers. I was going against the team's tendencies, how the guy that I was playing against dressed, like all of these small detail things that I felt would give me an advantage come Saturday afternoon, that I'm like, I know you, my opponent, I know you so well that before you take your next breath, I know your cadence of your breathing. Now, I'm exaggerating slightly there, but that's just how much I submerge myself in studying the game and studying my opponents. And for me, when I talk about confidence, that's one building block of confidence, right? Is just studying and learning your craft and your opponents so well that, when they're coming out and they're running routes, it's like, I've already seen this, the way he plants his foot, the way he drops his shoulder, those kind of things, how the quarterback reads, blah, blah, blah. And, I just, I'd write the number of the guy that I was going against on a piece of white tape. I'd put that on my chest, and I was like, I'm inside your body for this whole week until Saturday. Mm-hmm. And then on Saturday, it's like it's already over, And as I say this now, it's not me talking shit. It's not me trying to, like, this is just the things that I did that I felt I needed to do in order to put myself at the level I felt I needed to perform at, you know? And, and like I said, I just had this chip on my shoulder, and I made very specific goals that my first full season playing at Laurier, I was like, these are the things that I'm going to accomplish. Mm-hmm. And I will prepare myself and position myself for when those opportunities come, that I'll be able to smack them out of the park. You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. And that's how it happened.
So after Laurier, what was the next step for you?
Well, after Laurier, I mean, I thought my football career, to be honest, was I thought it was just going to come to an end after university. Like, yes, I had, some achievements behind my name and all of that stuff, but, my knee was like, it was up and down. It was hard to predict how it would be. Like, I'd have some Fridays, where we're going through a walkthrough where I'm like, I don't know how I'm going to be able to play tomorrow. And, somehow, by the grace of God, on Saturday morning, I'd wake up and I'd be good to go. But, knowing, and I say knowing and not in the truest sense of the word almost, but if you can almost understand knowing the unknown, and I'm not just trying to use, semantics with words, but is like knowing the unknown, being aware that there's this whole component you don't know, if that makes sense.
Yeah, for sure.
That's how I felt about making it to the professional level, and like I said, like there was not IG at the time, Instagram, there was not like YouTube that you could
promote yourself.
You couldn't do those things, and to dive deeply into what was happening, that wasn't available then. So like, you didn't really know what happened in the locker room. You didn't really know how guys prepared and trained, you know what I mean? So there was this really big empty gap, from my perspective anyways, from university level, what it took to the professional level, which again, to me, I think benefited because I tried to prepare, in this insurmountable way for the unexpected. I didn't actually get drafted, although you said that at the start of the podcast. I didn't actually get drafted.
Okay.
I ended up because when I transferred from the States, that was my draft year. I didn't play. Anyways, doesn't really matter. I didn't get drafted. I signed as a free agent, and then Winnipeg called me at the end of my season, and they offered me an opportunity to go and try out for the team as a free agent. So. I went there, and it went relatively well. Well, that's actually not true. It went really well, and we played in our second exhibition game, and everything was going smooth. I was feeling good. I was just trying to impress the coaches, and I went down to make a big hit, and I did make a big hit, and anyways, but I ended up smashing my collarbone, so my collarbone broke.
Jeez,
yeah, and I like as soon as it happened, so I broke my collarbone 2 times previous to that, playing football. So this was the 3rd time my collarbone broke. And anyways, we're playing against Toronto, and they were basically driving down on us. So they were going hurry up at the very end of the game. It was about 90 seconds or something like that left in the game. They're doing a hurry up offense. And so I'm just like, I'm not going to pull myself off. And it's almost like I'm trying to just compartmentalize, like, I'm fine. And I couldn't lift my shoulder, but I didn't even have a chance. And I'm like, I can't go down. Like, I can't let the coaches see me go down. So I just kept going. They're like smashing us on this. Like, it was like a 90-yard drive. And anyways, we're like getting towards the end of the drive, and like, I can't even really feel my shoulder. And they call, and then they switched me to free safety. And then we ended up running this blitz, and I had to go into the gap. So anyways, I'm like coming through I think it was the week A gap. And anyways, I got to lead with my left shoulder to get through the hole. And this big old lineman is there and just grabbed me and tossed me on the ground. And I just collapsed. Like, I couldn't even get myself off the ground. Anyways, scraped up. That was it. They scored. I went off to the sideline. And, the trainer's like, yeah, but you're done. Anyways, and that was the end of the story. And then my roommate from Laurier was playing for the Argos at the time, Kojo, and so we connected after the game because he was playing for the Argos at the time, trying out for the Argos, and I was trying out for Winnipeg.
Yeah.
And then we connected, and I remember just being bent about it, and he's like, yeah, I guess we're going back to Laurier. And I was like, I'm not going back, man. I'll be fine.
What do you mean by that? Like,
basically because as a rookie, if you're injured, it's very difficult for a professional team to keep you on the roster, right? Yeah. So I still had eligibility left. He had eligibility left. So a lot of times what they'll do is they'll send you back for your next year.
Okay.
So I went in after the game, and they said it's a pretty bad break. Like, you're going to be out probably 12 weeks. Or no, they thought 10 weeks. Jeez. I think it ended up being like 12. I actually missed. So that was in June. 4, 8, 12, yeah. think it was in June or May. I don't remember anyways. But I actually was out so long. I missed the first game of the university season still. So I didn't play until the second game, and then it was finally better or good enough to play. And so I went back to Laurier and played one more year there. And I think it was good, like I wasn't happy about it at the time, but it was also exciting to go back for one more year and give it a go with, my dogs from Laurier. And, we did what we did. And then I went back the next year. Winnipeg invited me back, thankfully, and they invited me back. And then at that point, then I made the team and continued my professional career.
And then from Winnipeg, where did you end up?
So then everything was smooth. Everything was good. I was like really loving playing for Winnipeg, and Coach Dave Ritchie. I was, again, I think another blessing to me of having another solid coach as my first professional coach, being Dave Ritchie. Like, he just, taught our team, like, how to be a pro, how to approach the game. His expectations were like through the roof.
Shout out to the coaches, man.
Big time, it can't go denied. Like, I can't just sit here and be like, it was just me. I just was this, like, warrior.
I know a lot of people do try to say that.
I honestly, I was like, I said at the start of this, like, I was molded by a lot of coaches, impacted, influenced, and he was another great coach I had along the way that, taught me a lot and ripped me every day in practice, all the time. But that's because he just expected more. And I had a lot of awesome teammates as well that helped guide me. Tommy Europe, for example, he was one that just, helped and shaped me. And he, although I was brought there to push him, playing the same position.
Yeah. So he was ahead of you at this time?
Oh, yeah, he was ahead of me, and he was deep into his career at this time, and he was the starter. And, he could have easily just been like, yeah, this guy's coming here to replace me and just give me the cold shoulder. But he actually really helped me a lot on the field and off the field as well. And, helped me out. And Jerome Bolden, Harold Nash, like, these guys were like studs, like Marvin Coleman. Like, these guys were studs and brought me in, and they all taught me something. I just shut my mouth and just listened and took in the different gems that they all shared with me and gave me as a rookie. And then when I got my opportunity to go, and then you got to choke it, you know what I mean? And I got a lot of opportunities as a rookie, and tried to answer the bell, every time. Yeah, so at that point, Ottawa came back into the CFL. The Ottawa Renegades was the name at the time. So they had an expansion draft. They drafted me in the first round from Winnipeg, and I remember. So I left. I was in the off season, and all of a sudden that happened. And then I remember thinking, like, I think it was Brendan Taman, the general manager at the time. Actually, it was him. He called me and told me, we're protecting a certain amount of guys, but, you're, young guy, first year. So they'll probably want to go for some veteran guys. And so I kind of didn't even really think about it, because I figured, like, they're not going to probably pick me, I'll be headed back to Winnipeg. And I was looking forward to going back to Winnipeg also. And then, anyways, I got the call that I got drafted by Ottawa, and I wasn't happy about that either.
Why is that?
Nothing against Ottawa. I just felt like I was going back to a really good situation. I felt like I had established myself
with Winnipeg.
And I felt like I was going back into a good scenario. With Winnipeg, and they actually had moved me. They liked how, my aggression on the run. They liked my ability to cover and, put me out at corner rather than free safety. And so, I was playing a lot of corner, a lot of nickel, a lot of dime. I just felt like I was going back to a really good scenario, and then it all switched, and then I ended up getting drafted to Ottawa, and Coach Pau Pau and Coach Connie Kawhi called me up and said, hey, thanks, or not thanks, but welcome to the team. Look forward to having you out here. And then, and I mean, they said a lot of good things, so, to the next situation, you just adapt and move on, Yeah, showed up to Ottawa, played here in Ottawa with the Renegades for 4 years, all 4 years, and then um,
What was that season like? Like, how was that experience? Not only playing, but
yeah,
living in Ottawa. Like,
yeah,
as you know, you've been here for a while, and Ottawa doesn't.
mm,
It's not really popping compared to Toronto or,
mm-hmm.
let's say, like a Montreal. Like, there's not much activity, especially being a young guy.
Right,
And I assume like you're outgoing, at that time. So it's like you're looking for that.
yeah,
And everybody knows Ottawa being like a government city. Everybody's just like slow moving. So what
yeah,
was that
yeah.
experience like on and off the field?
Off the field, it was without being offensive to anybody. It was, I guess, off the field was an upgrade from Winnipeg, to be honest.
Yeah.
Not that there was a whole bunch of action in either places, but coming to Ottawa, it was actually a nice change, to be honest. Yeah, I mean, like the nightlife and all that kind of stuff was definitely not like, it wasn't popping or nothing like that. But the city itself, it was nice, and it being the capital city, and I never really explored Ottawa a whole lot other than a couple soccer tournaments as a youth, and then so it was good. And then I mean, football wise, the first year was really good. On the field, it wasn't great. Like, I went from playing with Winnipeg, where we were 14-4, if I remember, and we went to the Grey Cup that year. That's all I'll say about that. And then I, come over to Ottawa the next year, and complete reciprocal, we went 4-14. So that was very humbling. Like, you went from an established team, very specific leadership, and there was a lot of dogs on that team, like that I learned a lot from, and just how we entered every single game and what the expectation was, and to, clear leadership, and then transitioning to a team where it was like all guys drafted. So guys trying to establish who's the leader and who's their spot. And then, so it was a real, before even walking onto the football field, the whole experience was very different. And, and that translated. And so, but it was great to play and, with Coach Pau Pau, and, I appreciated my years playing with him. But yeah, it was a real struggle. Like, every year was just all kinds of different scenarios happening, and that's, I think, it impacted on the field. But anyways, yeah, that was kind of how that went, and I think that was 4 years with Ottawa, and then that whole thing shut down, without getting into all those details. And then they had a dispersal draft, and then I ended up in Saskatchewan, Regina, Saskatchewan.
How was that? How was that experience?
Game day was dope. Like, on game day, Saskatchewan is like it's wild. Like, those fans are real, man. Like, those fans are real. Like, I really enjoyed playing for Saskatchewan on game day, but the other days it was like, there wasn't a whole lot going down.
That's like supreme isolation, I feel.
Yeah, and I'm thankful that it was at the end of my career. Yeah. It. I mean, I'm a kind of guy, like, I like to stay to myself for the most part. Yeah. And yeah, Saskatchewan or Regina, anyways, it kind of made you do that.
Yeah.
So, at the end of my career, it didn't really faze me that bad, but I mean, just. It was just a very different environment, and
I'd imagine,
if you're one of those if you're one of those athletes that you like being, the center of attention and the focal point, like, Saskatchewan is great for that. Yeah. Because they think they really care about their players. I feel, anyways, and from what I saw. As a team, it was good because you're kind of forced to hang with your teammates a lot more. So I found like the team environment was a lot closer in Saskatchewan. Although I was one of the new kids, on the block there, coming into the dispersal draft, and it happened very late in the off season. So that really messed up a lot of rosters in the league as well, and crushed a lot of guys' careers. But that was probably the closest team I had ever been on. Like,
like bond wise.
Yeah, bonding wise, and like always, hanging out and stuff. And that was like not really a big thing. Like, I like to fully submerge myself in football and everything. And then when I'm like done with it, I like to start to, step away from it and put myself in other things.
Yeah.
But there it was, I was, going to this guy's house, for barbecues, and this guy's house to play dominoes, and then guys are hanging out here, going out to eat with the guys, and like, so it was good. It was very the three teams that I played for, it was three very different experiences of a professional career, and again, I learned a lot from all of those different scenarios for sure.
And so, like, as your career is winding down, you obviously have to make a decision of what's next.
Yeah.
How did you get involved with wanting to be a personal trainer, and then becoming a strength coach, and then opening up your own gym? What was that process like? And was it difficult for you at the end of your career? Because I know a lot of people might think when you're a professional athlete, okay, after I play a certain amount of years, I'm probably going to be set for life. That's just from the outside looking in. That's what a lot of people think.
Yeah.
But now when you're in the thick of things and your career is winding down, you have to start looking for other ways to make revenue to survive on. So what was that transition, and was becoming a personal trainer as well as a strength coach at the top of your priority list, or did you kind of just trickle into that?
Yeah. I was one of these players that I always felt like, I got to get ready for when my athletic career is over. I got to get ready for my athletic career is over. I got to have a game plan. I've got to have a transition plan. Like, I was always conscious of it. I knew I wouldn't play professional forever.
Yeah.
I didn't bank on it, playing forever. I knew, but I never. People talk about it and talked about it, but, and I say this respectfully, nobody showed me how to do it. And it's again one of those things, kind of like we talk about at the start here, is like having this grand vision, and this is where you are, and that doesn't necessarily mean the bottom, but wherever you're at, and then where you want to get to, it's filling in the gap that's where we miss. You know what I mean? And it was the same thing, like, you got to like prepare for a game, your game plan after it's over. You got to prepare for your game plan when it's over. Everybody told me that, but like, how do you do that? And to some people that might be like, well, you just do this and that, but like there's a lot of things going on there, like, and there's a lot of realities that happen. Like, here I am, finished playing. It's, you've been playing or in this professional career for 7 or 8 years. So now all of a sudden, you're out there trying to get into another career path, because now you don't just want a job, you know what I mean? And there is a difference.
Yeah.
So, I'm going to these different interviews, and people are like, okay, so like you graduated from university in 2000 and it's 2008. So what have you been doing?
Yeah.
Oh, I've been playing, professional, and some people don't care. Like, okay, that's great. So
what can you do for me?
What can you do for me, or what can you do for my business?
Yeah.
And it's like, well, I've been playing professional. Some people are like, oh, that's really cool, awesome, good for you.
Yeah.
What have you been doing? You know what I mean? And here you are, like, you're taking these little, for myself, taking different little jobs, but not really investing into what wasn't after. You know what I mean? And so it was a very humbling and tough transition for me personally, anyways, and not really knowing. And then it's like all of a sudden you go from like yesterday, there's people after the game waiting to, shake your hand or tell you a good game, or jack you up about your game, or ask you for your autograph, or boo you, or whatever that scenario is.
There's always like some sort of attention that you're getting.
Something. Yeah. And there's also a game plan there, right? Like, that tomorrow morning at 8:05 you need to be in the training room, and then at 8:25 you're in special teams meetings, and then at like your day is scripted to now all of a sudden you wake up the next day, nobody's waiting for you, Nobody's booing you. Nobody's cheering for you. Nobody wants your autograph.
Mm-hmm.
Nobody's like, nobody cares,
Mm-hmm.
quote unquote. And there's no syllabus for the day. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
If I drink 6 liter of water today or I drink 1 liter of water, nobody really cares.
Yeah.
If I work out today or I don't, nobody cares. If I eat well, like, and when I say nobody cares, I don't mean that from a martyr standpoint of like nobody cares. I just mean like it's not anybody's concern anymore.
Yeah.
You know, you are your own entity now,
Mm-hmm.
and that's a very, you know, challenging situation and scenario to be in, because since I was, you know, 8, 9, 10 years old, I've always had this like specific um, goal or vision in the back of my head
Mm-hmm.
that drove me and the decisions I made along the way. And now all of a sudden it was like you're just in this empty space,
Mm.
you know. For myself anyways, I was just in this empty space, you know. Anyways, that'll be, you know, a discussion at another time, I think, because there's a lot of value there that I think a lot of people could take from it.
Mm-hmm.
And again, that also I think impacts the way that I coach today as well. But nonetheless, I was in that sort of space. I was training in martial arts at the time, and there was this empty gym in the front, basically in the front foyer of this martial arts place. And you know, I revert back to when I said on a blank piece of paper, started constructing these ideas, and I literally, there was this, you know, empty space, 390 square feet of space. There was a couple machines, dumbbell rack, and I was like, hey, like, talking to the owner of the business, and said, hey, this space is like empty, like maybe I could like train people out of here. And he was like, yeah, for sure, like, yeah, that'd be great. And so I was like, okay. And then he was like, okay.
Then what?
Okay, now what?
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? And
Yeah.
so again, right, opportunity, but I wasn't really prepared for it.
Mm-hmm.
Or I shouldn't say that. I did not prepare myself for it.
Yeah.
So opportunity came.
Mm-hmm.
So at that stage, I was like, okay, well, what do I need to learn? What do I need to do? And that's when I went and I, you know, started taking some courses that would make me or give me at least the platform to train people and work with people. And that's really how it started. And as I say it, it sounds so simple rolling off of my mouth right now, but it was a lot of work and a lot of humbling empty nights.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, as I think back to some of those scenarios. But that's really how this whole thing started.
Mm-hmm.
And so that was in my second last off season. So I was going back out to Saskatchewan in May or June or whenever our training camp was. So leading into that off season, I started training people, you know, doing one-on-one. And I wouldn't call myself at the time, I wouldn't say I was a strength coach.
Mm-hmm.
I'd say I was a personal trainer.
Yeah. And what's the difference for those who don't know? Because a lot of people in the Instagram era, they're just tying both into one.
Yeah, I think, I mean, you know, I think those two things offer a slightly different, I shouldn't say slightly. Those two things offer, I think, just a different style of coaching, a different style of client, and a different style of preparation.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not saying one is better or worse. They are, I think, different things. In my mind, they are anyways. And, you know, there are trainers that train athletes. There's strength coaches that train personal training clients. So, you know, this, that, or the other, I think that probably could be a whole other episode. And I think a lot of people would passionately have their perspectives on it.
Mm-hmm.
But for my thoughts at the time, I was a trainer and really, like, you know, learning the ropes and training, let's call it fitness enthusiasts, you know, just kind of everyday people wanting to, you know, lose 10 pounds, get in better shape, you know, some of those basic things. And when I say basic, I don't mean that in a downgrading way, but there was not necessarily a performance that was required from the training, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
And yeah, so I had, you know, a couple clients at the time, and you know, and I trained there for about 4 or 5 months, and then I went back out to my training camp for football, and left those clients. They all were aware that I was going back to training camp, so you know, started off with that, and that was yeah, it was good. I learned a lot from there, and that's kind of how I started off, was just, you know, personal training. A couple clients, you know, 50 years old, 45 years old.
Mm-hmm.
You know, I think my first or second client was, she just wanted to be in the best shape of her life at 50 years
Yeah.
old. I think another one of my clients, the first client I had, she was in, like, you know, like those dog shows.
Like training dogs.
Yeah, yeah.
Like,
So she'd run around with her
yeah.
dog, and the dog would do all. The dog was the actual athlete.
Yeah. But you just need
But
to
she
keep
just
up.
needed to be in shape for
Yeah.
it. You know what I
Yeah.
mean? And that's kind of how it started.
Mhm.
You know what I'm saying? And I learned a lot from working with that type of clientele, big time. That nothing of the way that I trained at that time you would probably see today, but I learned so much from working with those type of people that I think make the style, the way, my approach to training now, how it is.
Mm.
You know?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And now we're here.
Mm-hmm.
So how long have you been in this location?
This has been this July. We're in August right now, so this July was 8 years.
8 years. Congratulations.
Yeah. Thank you. I appreciate that.
So what have you noticed as far as like the growth in your business and your training style and the athletes that you've come across? Obviously you have different demographics, from high school, like we said earlier, to professional athletes, to business working men and women. What have you noticed from that one piece of paper, writing down like this literally was all just a dream at one point and now you're 8 years deep?
Mm-hmm.
Let's talk about that transition and the progress that you've made and what you've realized about your growth and the type of people that you were inviting into this facility, as well as that message that you're constantly preaching. Because like, even when we did a bit of interviews with like the athletes and the clients that came through, it's funny because I know a lot of them do not talk to each other.
Mm-hmm.
And the one thing that always comes up is like the details. It's always in the details.
Mm-hmm.
So is that something that you stress upon them, or is that something that they're just picking up off of your energy?
Mm-hmm. I think both. You know, not to be on the fence about it, but I think it's both. I think the way that I try to handle my business and my approach on a day-to-day basis, especially my interactions with my athletes and clients, and then I think the things that I hammer away at with them. You know, a lot of the things that I hammer away at my athletes before we ever get into, you know, technique and poundages and percentages, and like before we even get into that stuff, you know, I'm on my athletes about how they walk into the gym,
Mm-hmm.
how they clean up after themselves, you know, did
And
they bring their shoes?
Why is that important to you though? Because like that's not your job to be a parent, you know.
Mm-hmm.
They're paying you just to train. So why is that such an important part of your programming and your culture that you create within this facility?
It is my job. I feel it is a part of my job, because I'm being trusted with part of their growth and part of their development. You know, the weights, the iron is just a vehicle to help get them to where they want to get to, you know, because the truth of the matter is, as much as I would love for it, as much as I could try to help and prepare them, the amount of athletes that are going to go and have a life playing as a professional athlete is tiny.
Mm-hmm.
You know, it's a tiny percentage. And at that, what it will require for that small percentage of athletes that make it pro, what that will require to get there, number two, more importantly, stay there, it will be those details that will reflect on the court or on the field or on the turf, whatever the case is. So because at that level, what a lot of people hear and think is like, oh, at the professional level, like the difference between this guy and that guy, or that girl and this girl, it's like the smallest things. Everybody at the professional level is fast. Everybody at the professional level is big, strong, quick. Like all of those attributes, everybody has them, or else they wouldn't be there. So a lot of times what things fall back on is your technique, is your approach, is the details, is the methodical approach throughout your day to continue to stay in wherever you're at. Just like when you start getting into heavy poundages and heavy loads, and we talk about that today during the training session there, we were, creeping up in our weight in the box squats. And I was telling you how, like, the weight that we were at, like, I got to be that much more dialed in and totally connected with my body and how I operate, because the margin for error becomes that much smaller the higher levels that you go. Whether you're a power lifter or you're in CrossFit games, or in football, you're in like whatever your thing is, the higher levels you go, the heavier lifts you go into, like every small little thing becomes that much bigger. So to come back to your question, that's why it's my job, and why I take great pride in that, is those are things that I feel the athletes need to get to where they want to get to, and they're important components. And if they're not getting that potentially somewhere else, that's a part of what I do.
And I feel like it's with sports, like obviously we both played sports. I feel like it's more than just on the field or in the gym. I feel like it's also something that you can carry on throughout life and in the business world. And that's what, like, I'm noticing exactly, like, through those interviews, is just now you had future pro players still training with you, and till this day they're now saying it's the details, and this is something that I carry out in my everyday life. So just like your coaches did you well in high school, and instilled certain messages in you, like, you can reflect now to this day, because it kind of shaped you. And that's what I'm seeing with these athletes. Like, we've been working for what, like 6-7 months or so. And it's just like you see it in the interviews, like the passion that they talk with. It's more than just coming to the gym lifting weights. And I've been around other trainers as well, and like in those types of environments, and we talk about community, building that community online just through comments and stuff, and just the energy that you're getting. I just feel like it's one of those situations that people will always remember you, whether they train with you next month or never again. Like, those are just like tidbits that is always just going to be refreshed in their head and just cemented.
And that's great to me that you picked that up, because when all's said and done, truthfully, how much weight you lifted with me or your coach or your trainer or your team, like, probably forget it. You know what I mean? How many times you did this many push-ups, this many squats, you lifted 500 pounds on your back, or you, like, you know what I mean? Because that's not what this, anyways, in terms of performance training here and preparing athletes for performance, like, those numbers matter, but those are not the thing that's going to, you know what I mean, be what's lasting with you. And when I hear the athletes through the interviews that you've been doing, and you've been capturing these different things, and like you said, these are not prompted answers. These athletes just go. And when that reoccurring message happens, like, that's a sense of pride to me, because I think, like, there's something that was instilled in me from different people that the message is being carried on. Because and I say this message with my clients and athletes, like, I'm on them about how they line up their shoes, and you've heard that message through different videos. And if you you go back and you watch different videos with different clients that you've captured. That's one of the things, right? Sharpening their pencil before they start their training and not writing your numbers into the programming with a dull pencil. Being hydrated properly before you show up, bringing your food to the gym so that after your training session you have your food. Like, does that make you, a 1,000-yard rusher in a season? You lining up your shoes against the wall, is that going to help you drop 32 points in your next basketball game? Is, you being hydrated or forgetting to be hydrated on Tuesday, is that going to be the reason you get a NCAA scholarship or you don't? No, but if you add those three things that you don't do consistently, and then you add another thing and another thing, like you're starting to chip away at your own armor. And then eventually 1 thing, 2 things, 4, 5, 6 things add up to the grand picture that now all of a sudden, if you take extreme ownership for your performance or lack thereof, and you start to go back, these are how you chip away at your confidence. Because you now start to understand that you weren't preparing yourself and you weren't prepared. So, I miss out on 5 things to get myself ready through the week, and you nailed all 5 of those things. And you and I come up in competition, and your sport was basketball, and I'm trying to cover you, and things don't necessarily go well, let's just say. And now all of a sudden I start playing these head games with myself, and I see this with athletes, and I'm like, oh man, this guy's a little bit quicker than me. Well, yeah, I didn't drink enough water today.
And I didn't go to sleep early enough.
I didn't go to sleep early enough. I was on IG all night until 2 a.m. I was on the video games, and you know what I mean? And I all of a sudden here, I'm like talking myself out of my competition with you.
Yeah.
And then on the flip side of that, if you're an athlete that's dialed in and you're starting to see me go down, you start reflecting on, yeah, I ate great all week. This guy can't hold me. You know what? I didn't miss a single training session last month. This guy can't hold me. And you see how now what starts to happen is that separation. And now all of a sudden at the end of the game, are you that much better of an athlete than me? And I'm that much worse of an athlete of you? Like maybe, but maybe actually we're very close. But I created this separation negatively, and you created the separation positively, And I know I'm kind of going out there right now, but this is how I think about things. And what all that stuff I just rambled about comes down to is put your fucking shoes where they're supposed to be. Pick up your shit, clean up after yourself, eat the food that you're supposed to eat, show up to your training session hydrated. Like, just do what you're supposed to do. And and I start getting passionate about that because I've gone through it. I've seen athletes, I've prepared athletes, I've watched athletes that should be balling out of control not achieve their potential because they've just slacked off on these small things. And that's usually the devil's in the details, is the cliche they say, and it's not by accident. You know what I'm saying? So when I hear athletes passionately talk about those things, or a parent comes to me and says, wow, so and so now he cleans up after himself, that's it's part of my job. You know what I mean? In my eyes, I'm not telling you out there as a strength coach or as a personal trainer, like that's what you need to do, but that's what I feel is required from me with my people. It's my duty. You know what I mean? I make sure I'll sharpen the pencils when I put them into the programs for the athlete, because I also want them to know I'm prepared for you to show up today. Whether you show up today or not, that's on you, but I'm here and I'm expecting you to be here. And when you show up here, you need to know I'm ready. And I try to consistently do that. So it's establishing what the standard is. You know what I mean? And that's just the way that I feel about it. And that's how I get down.
So what can we expect from you in the next years to come, months, days, weeks, just with growth, and not only for your clients, but also for yourself? Where do you want to take this thing that you've built literally from the ground up? What can we expect from you? I
think I'm always evolving myself. I think trying to be a better version of whatever I was last year, last month, last week, yesterday, last Friday. I mean, I'm trying to, push my levels as a coach, to put my little impact, and have my little thumbprint on the athletes. I believe me, like every time I post out an accomplishment or an achievement by an athlete, whether that's them, receiving a scholarship, whether that's them, dropping 35 on somebody's head, whether that's them, making their first sports team, whether that's them winning a championship or like whatever the case is, or maybe that's just them finally getting a chance to start. Maybe that's just getting in the game, because I have all aspects of athletes. Like for me, I'm also aware, like it's not just me. Like I don't think that. And every time like I post something or an accomplishment, like there's a lot of other working parts there. Like, but I also feel it's important for me to show like, hey, look what's going on here. You know what I mean? And likely if an athlete's doing a lot of things and accomplishing a lot of things, there's likely a lot of parts that are working well with them. They may not have a great support system, but they may be not using that as their excuse or their reason, and they may be finding other ways to handle their business. You know what I mean? And for me, it brings a certain pride into me to see athletes doing that, because like I said, I work with athletes of all aspects, all economic backgrounds, all different scenarios. And so when I see people just chipping away, like that's inspiring to me as a coach. And I mean, I'm very inspired by my people. I say it all the time, and it's authentic, it's true, like I am, and so for me, how can I have this high expectation of you and not have even a higher expectation of myself? And that's again another, like, I think area where there's a difference with how I approach what I do with other people. I'm always trying to like learn more and be a better coach, and the way I coached 10 years ago is definitely not the way that I coach now.
For sure.
But I do believe that the person and people that I trained 10 years ago would say I'm still, like, my foundation is still the same. I've just evolved, right? And that's what's gonna always happen. And I mean, even us and the work that we do is a big evolution for me to kind of put myself out there, put what I do out there, let people behind the curtain and see kind of what happens. And I think, there's a lot of value there, because now other people are starting to see the messages that the athletes that I'm fortunate to work with, what they have to say. And it's not just, well, coach says this, coach says this. This is the athlete showing you, hey, this kid just finished a college career at university 5 years and has now signed a professional contract. These things are things that have helped him be successful as one aspect. There's other things going on there too. And I think it's an important message to hear, because the more people and more athletes hear it, the more that they are like, yeah, I can do it. And that's my biggest thing is, trying to just inject that confidence and sense of worth, you know what I mean? That no matter whatever's going down or whatever shit you've gone through, you just keep plugging away, And I mean, everybody can draw off of that statement I just made in different ways. I know you can. I can. It applies to me, and everybody that I work with, from a 70-year-old personal training client that is crushing it in the gym for their own reason, to the 14-year-old kid that hasn't even got a scratch on his or her elbow yet. You can still draw something from that, right?
For sure. Well, man, that's probably well over like 40 minutes.
Yeah.
These ice up sessions get heavy. But before we end this podcast, just explain what ice up means, because you use it in a lot of different ways, and you expressed, obviously off camera, it means different things in different situations. Right. You got your ice up workouts, you got your ice up conversation. So just give the people a little insight on what that actually means.
I'd like to go into detail in it at another time, but I will say for now, what I'll leave you with is this: Ice Up is a mentality and approach to what you do, whether that's training, whether that's having a conversation, whether that's, you know, in your car 2 minutes before you're about to walk into your workplace. All of those things, it's a mentality and it's a mental approach to the scenario, to the situation. You know, and then you know, it can take on a life of its own, really. But if I could break it down into its simplest form, it's just a mentality. You know what I mean? It literally is a mentality. And if you reflect it back to, you know, when we just do our Ice Up session at the end of the week on Fridays, you know, we're just going ham, and, you know, technique's a little bit out the window, and we're just going in, and the athletes are just going in. That's the same mentality. Yeah. It's like, it's burning, it's hard, you want to shut it down, you want to quit. You just ice up and you just keep going and keep going.
Well, there you have it. We're breaking out of the man's shell, getting him on camera. And this is the first episode of Ice Up season. Many more to come. I hope you guys enjoyed the first episode. I don't even know how long it is, but fuck it, who cares? Yeah. And yeah, I hope you guys enjoyed. I'm Emmanuel, also known as EK Visions.
I'm Coach Ru, Donnie Ruiz, out here.
And we'll catch you next time.